أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Inshallah, we will begin now and we will continue today with lesson 11. Before we do that though, I'd like to give some time for any questions that you may have, and also we'll do a little bit of review of some of the main concepts just to make sure that we all remember how basic sentence works in Arabic, and we're not going to forget what we learned before as we learn new material. Any questions before we start? Okay, then I have a question. What is the simplest possible structure that a sentence can have in Arabic? The simplest sentence is a nominal sentence, or a sentence that contains a subject and a predicate, a mubtada and a khabar. It does not have to have any verb at all. And what's an example of a sentence like that? Jumla ismiya. هذا كتاب. هذا كتاب. What is هذا? هذا is a mubtada. Meaning it's the subject. And kitabun is a khabar or predicate. And we're telling you something about هذا. We're telling you that this is a book. The mubtada and the khabar will both be marfu' in case. You can see that visibly with kitabun. But can you see any sign that hadha is marfu'? No. Hadha is an unchangeable word, or mabni. It will always stay in that form. But because it's functioning as a mubtada, it's considered to still be marfu'. And if there were another noun instead of hadha there, it might show the fact that it is marfu'. So instead of saying hadha kitabun, if I had said al-Qur'anu kitabun, it's the same structure of a sentence. Al-Qur'anu kitabun. I'm telling you something about Al-Qur'an, which is that it is a book. And Al-Qur'anu is marfu', kitabun is also marfu', and it's visible. Mubtada and khabar. There's other examples where the mubtada might not show, or the khabar, depending on what the word is, what its i'rab is. We have a book that's known as Al-Kafi. Al-Kafi kitabun. Al-Kafi is the name of a book. It's a book of hadith. Kitabun. It is a book. So the same thing. This is mubtada. Kitabun is khabar. Now, here's where I want to see if you remember way back, I think it was last week. Why does the i'rab of Al-Kafi not show? It is marfu'. Yes, there are a certain type of noun if you're interested, they're called properly al-ism. It's not very good handwriting. I'll write it again. Al-ism al-manqus. Al-ism al-manqus, a noun that is deficient from naqs, deficiency. The root is kafa, to be sufficient. Kaf, ya, kaf, fa, ya. And because the third letter is a weak letter, it's called deficient. Ismul manqus. When we form the ismul fa'il, right, we'd expect to see kafiyun, right? Fa'ilun, qatilun, katibun, kafiyun. But kafiyun is difficult to say. And so it's shortened to saying kafin. If you want to say curer, the word for curing is shafa, and the ismul fa'il is shafin. Not shafi, but shafin. That's what you will say if it is marfu'. If it's mansub, then it's easy to say kafiyan. So we can say kafiyan. And we can say shafiyan. If it's majroor, to say kafiyin, shafiyin is also a little bit difficult. And so that's also shortened to kafin or shafin. The same form is used for marfu' and majroor, but not for mansub. When you add alif lam, what happens? When you add alif lam, the ya will show up. So you will say al-kafi in all three forms. Correct? However, if it's marfu', you'd expect there to be a dhamma. Of course, no tanween, because with alif lam you can't have tanween. But the dhamma will not show up. That al-kafiyu, the dhamma will be dropped. With the majroor, you'd expect there to be a kasra, but al-kafiye is also considered difficult to pronounce, and the kasra is dropped. Only if it is mansub will the fatha show up, al-kafiya. And so in our sentence, this part was review. In our sentence, al-kafi kitabun, why does the dhamma not show? Because it is ism manqus, and it's marfu'. And the dhamma will not show up on that ya. So we'll say al-kafi kitabun. There's a verse of the Quran addressing the Prophet. Innama anta munzirun wa likulli qawmin had. Wa likulli qawmin had. Or hadin, which is the same as hadi, a guide. So, O Messenger, you are simply a warner, one who is to convey the message of God. For every people there is a guide. وَلِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ هَادٍ. It's not majroor. This is part of that very simple structure of a sentence. It just doesn't look very simple because there is لِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ. But we know all of the parts. Here, li is a harful jar. Kul is majroor. For every. And kul is also majroor, is also mudaf, and qawmin is mudaf ilayh. Kul is generally used mudaf. So you say kullun nasi, all of the people. Kullu rajulin, every man. Kullu muslimin, every Muslim. It's usually mudaf. That entire phrase is the khabar, because it starts with a lam, that harful jar. It can't be a mubtada. A mubtada can be a word, but a phrase or a sentence can't be the subject of a sentence. So when we say likulli qawmin, we know that is the khabar that has come in the front. And hadin is the mubtada that has come at the end. And if you look at the meaning, that makes sense. A guide is or exists for every people. So for every people is the information that is being given, and the subject about whom we're giving the information is a guide. There is for every community a guide or an imam. And that's why, according to some narrations, this phrase, this sentence is referring to imamat. That the Prophet doesn't need to worry about everybody accepting Islam or not. Allah will continue the guidance and every people will have a guide. So hadin is a mubtada. It's marfu'. But because it is manqus, it ends with that weak letter, you can't tell that it is marfu'. If the ayah had been لِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ إِمَامٌ in place of hadin, if it had been imamun, then you would have seen the marfu', because imamun can show that it's marfu'. Of course, we don't have the power to edit the Quran, but in any sentence in Arabic, if you are confused about the i'rab, you can put an equivalent word in its place and see how the structure works. Right? So hadin is not majroor here, there's nothing to give it jar. It's the subject. It's just as if Allah had said, لِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ إِمَامٌ, or لِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ مُرْشِدٌ, a guide, somebody to show the path. لِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ altogether is the khabar. And that also is not showing any i'rab, but it is marfu. لِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ. Inshallah, we will have some time, we hope, at the end of class to review some verses of Quran as well. So let's look at lesson 11 right now. If you come to page 1, there is one correction that was pointed out to me just before class. I didn't catch it before. At the very bottom of page 1, there is a chart which gives the singular, dual, and plural for the inactive or for the passive participle. And if you look at the plural masculine, you see mabi'una and mabyu'una, correct? Underneath it, it should be mabi'una and mabyu'ina. Mabi'ina and mabi'ina. So that mabyu'ina. So the chart should read like this: the plural masculine, mabi'una, mabyu'una, and mabi'ina mabyu'ina. So the marfu' form will always have a waw noon ending, and the mansub and majrur form will always have a ya noon ending. Mabi'una mabi'ina, mabyu'una mabyu'ina. That's for the masculine plural. Yes. No. So mabi'ane and mabyu'ane are not correct. That would be for the correct form for the dual. So now we'll continue where we left off. We did look, and we just reviewed the form for the fa'il, right, for the active participle. Hadin, kafin, ramin. Those are examples where the original letter was a ya. Da'in, which was originally a waw. So hadin is an example of a verb that originally had a ya, because the root letter was ha, dal, ya. Or you can say da'in, which is an example for dal, ain, waw, a root letter that was originally waw. But the form is the same. Hadin, da'in. If it has alif lam, we'll say al-hadi and ad-da'i. Now we come to the passive participle. In the case of the passive participle, if the original letter was a waw, then you will form the passive participle like this. We'll take the word da'a, that alif is converted from a waw. The passive participle will be formed by plugging in the original letters. So we start out with a pattern maf'ul, correct? Maf'ul. And we put the original letters of our verb. The first letter is a dal, the second letter is an ain, and then the third letter is a waw. So we have maf'ul, mad'u. These two letters are the same, and therefore they will be joined together. We call that idgham. And so we'll see mad'u, mad'u, called.
This is because the third letter is a
Yes, because the third letter is a weak letter, which happens to be a waw. Mad'u. Another example is the verb ghaza, ghaza, to raid. That's where the noun ghazwa comes from. Right? Somebody who conducts a raid is called somebody who conducts it, who does it. Not a ghazi, a ghazin. A ghazin. Or al-ghazi. If there's no alif lam, it's wrong to say ghazi. You won't say huwa ghazi. You'll say huwa ghaz or huwa ghazin. But if you put the alif lam, then you will add the ya. You'll say huwa al-ghazi. He is the raider or the knight. The one who is conducting the raid. So that's the ism al-fa'il. When it comes to the ism al-maf'ul, we'll say maghzu. Huwa maghzu. And the chart shows you the different forms. Maghzu. The dual will be maghzuwane, maghzuwaine. Or in the case of da'a, mad'uwane, mad'uwaine. In the case of the plural, mad'uwuna, mad'uwina. Mad'uwun and mad'uween. So there's 3 waws in a row. 2 of them are part of the word itself, mad'uwun, and then there's a waw noon suffixed on. Mad'uwuna, mad'uweena. No, that's not hard to say, because any alternative would have been even harder. So let's thank the Arabs that they decided to keep it mad'uwuna and mad'uweena. For the feminine, you will add a ta marbuta, and you will say mad'uwa, dual mad'uwatan, mad'uwatain, plural mad'uwat, either with a dhamma or with a kasra, depending on the case. And with the ya, we'll come to the ya. For the ya, we have a little bit of a problem when we make the form maf'ul. Let's take the root letters ha, dal, ya. Hada yahdi, to guide. Here, when we want to make the form maf'ulun, we have ma, correct? The first letter is a ha, the second letter is a dal, and then we have a waw, and the third letter is a ya. So maf'ul becomes mahdui. And mahdui may or may not be hard to say, but it doesn't sound right. It's beneath the dignity of an eloquent speaker of Arabic to say mahdui. And so what they decided to do is they say, let's convert the waw to a ya. And so they make it Mahdi. Mahdiyun.
Hadi is also guide, right?
Hadi is guide. Mahdi is guided. So hada is a transitive verb. Hadallahu al-mu'minin. God is the fa'il, or the had, and al-mu'minin is the maf'ul, or mahdiyun, the ones who are guided. So the doer is called had, al-hadi, and the ones who are guided will be mahdi or mahdiyun in the plural. So mahdi does not mean one who guides, but one who is guided. Well, no, I'm just explaining that it's not part of the sentence. So mahdiyun, or you could say mahdiyin, right? But the implication is that in this sentence, Allah is Allahu al-Hadi, and al-mu'mineen hum al-mu'minun hum al-mahdiyun. They are the ones who are guided. So this is just explaining what the function of Allah and mu'mineen is. Otherwise, grammatically you will say Allah is the fa'il and mu'mineen is the maf'ul. So that is the actual grammar of the sentence. Fa'il and maf'ul. The one doing the action, the one receiving the action. But the one who is doing the action will be called al-hadi, and the one who is being given the guidance, they will be called, if it's one person, mahdi, if it's a group, mahdiyun. So this is the problem that we face. We have mahdui, and mahdui doesn't sound right, so it becomes mahdi. And this is a good example to keep in mind because all of you have heard the word mahdi before, and you can relate it to hidayah, guidance.
But there's no shadda in Mahdi.
There is a shadda in mahdi, so it's al-mahdiyu, or huwa mahdiyun. So we'll say, for example, al-imam mul hadil mahdiyu. Al-imamul ha, but then we would say al-hadi. When we connect it to al-mahdi, the ya has a sukoon, the lam of al-mahdi has a sukoon, and so the ya will be dropped off in pronunciation. So we'll say al-Imam al-Hadil Mahdi. This ya will be pronounced. And if something comes after it, then we will say al-Mahdiyu. If there is a connection, we'll say al-Imam al-Hadiyu al-Imam al-Hadil Mahdiyu alladhi, whatever. So there, that Mahdiyu will be pronounced. Another example, the verb Rama, Yarmi, to throw. Something that is being thrown will be Marmiyun. To forget is Nasiya, Yansa, and something forgotten is Mansi. Mansi, forgotten. What is a person who forgets? Somebody started it. Nas. Nas. Nasin. But that's not the same as قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Because a forgetter is nasin, or if there's alif lam, it would be an-nasi. So قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ is not قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. It's قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Right? There's a kasra. That's a separate word. That word is nasun. Nasun means people, right? And that becomes nasan, and nasin, nasun if it's marfu', nasan if it's mansub, nasin if it's majroor. If it has alif lam, it would be an-nasu, an-nasa, or an-nasi. Ins is a word for humanity as well. Nasin means one who forgets, and it will always have a kasra if it's marfu', and the ya will show if it has alif lam. Is it possible to get the two confused? Possibly. But generally, the context will make it clear. So if you see a kasra and a tanween when it's supposed to be marfu', then that indicates that it is the forgetter. It's nasin, short for nasi. If you see an alif lam and it has a ya after it, it's also a forgetter. This is the way that nas, meaning people, will look. Because they're similar, you can see why some people have claimed that the word insan, it comes from nisyan. Because people forget frequently. So there's a saying, they're different roots. They function differently. But on some level, if not linguistically, then at least in terms of the human essence, al-insan murakkabun min al-khata'i wan-nisyan. person is composed of mistakes and forgetfulness. But there are two different words. The word nisyan is different from insan. This is alif nun sin. This is nun sin ya. More likely, insan comes from the root uns, which is familiarity. Anis or uns means to be close, familiar, comfortable. But at least two of the letters, the nun and the sin, they are shared. So Mahdi, Mahdiyan, Mahdiyain, Mahdiyun, Mahdiyin. Once you know the form, it's very predictable to make all of the dual, plural, and the feminine forms. Mahdiya, Mahdiyatan, Mahdiyatain, Mahdiyat, with a dhamma or a kasra. Those are easy to make. Then there are some verbs which are doubled, muda'af. They have a doubled letter. We know how to conjugate the verb. The ism al-fa'il and ism al-maf'ul will follow the same general rule. What we'll do is we'll shorten and combine letters, make things easier to say. So for example, fa'il, if we have the root letter dal, lam, lam, we won't say dalil. Instead we'll say dal. And there's a shadda. Dal. That's fa'il. Dalil. The form should, properly speaking, be fa'ilun dalilun. But we'll shorten it to dal. Or with the dad, lam, lam, you should say dalilun, but we don't say dalilun, we say dalun. وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا. The plural is ضَالُّونَ or ضَالِّينَ. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. So, dal, dallane, dallaine, dual. In the plural, dalluna, dallina. Or, with a dad, ضالون ضالين, like in Surah Al-Fatiha, ولا الضالين. And the feminine will be دالة, دالتان, دالتين, دالات or دالات. And for the ism al-maf'ul, are you awake? You don't need to be, because this one is very predictable, absolutely nothing irregular about it. The pattern is maf'ul, and we will say madlul. Nothing substituted, nothing omitted, no tricks that are going to be played on you. Madlulun, madlulane, madlulaine, madluluna, madlulina, madlulatun, madlulatane, madlulataine, madlulatun, madlulatin. Question? Dal is that which indicates, madlul is that which is indicated. Dal is so an indicator, and madlul is the thing that is indicated. The meaning. Dalil is from the same root word. Dalil has the same meaning as dal. something that guides. So that part was easy. But we don't want to stay with easy stuff for too long, because then you actually might end up falling asleep. So the next section requires a little bit of attention, and that is al-masdar. What is al-masdar? What are the root letters in al-masdar? Sadr. Right? Sadr means chest, or the main part. The most important, the main part. That's as-sadr. And al-masdar is the main part, or the origin from which a verb and all of the other derived forms of a word originate. The masdar. It corresponds in meaning to the infinitive. So to go, to come, to give. That's the meaning of the masdar. Right. To create. In English, there's different ways to express it. Sometimes we have a word with the suffix tion, so creation, exclamation. Sometimes we use the word with an ing suffix, creating, giving. And sometimes we have to create, to give, but they all convey a similar meaning. In Arabic, there are some kinds of masdar that are predictable. Some patterns of verbs that have predictable masdars. And you'll see patterns. So, for example, we haven't covered this type of verb, but I'm just giving you an example so you can recognize a few types of masdar. There is one pattern that is taf'il, like tasbih. Takbir. Tanwir. Taswir. Tamjid. Takthir, taqleel. And there's many other examples that you can tarjih. So these are all masdars from the same pattern. Right? There's another pattern, ifti'al, iktisab, ihtisham, intizam, ihtiram, intisar. That's another pattern. Infi'al, with a noon after the alif. Inkisar, inhisar, inzimam, or inzimam. There's different patterns. This one is taf'il, this one is ifti'al, the other one that was mentioned was infi'al, and there's other patterns as well. None of which we've learned yet. We will learn all of these, and they will all be regular. Once you learn one of those patterns, then you can make the patterns, other words according to that pattern. So there are some forms of the masdar in Arabic that are predictable and according to a set pattern, each of which has some very interesting exceptions, but there's a pattern. However, the basic verb in Arabic does not have a set pattern. The basic verb, meaning the three-letter verb with no added letters, there's different patterns, and you can't predict it, you just have to memorize it. So if you look at the next page, there's examples. Khalq, that's the pattern of fa'al. In many verbs, they have that pattern. Khalq, to create. Ra'i, to see. Afu, to forgive. Ja'al, amr, maut. They're all one pattern. But not all three-letter verbs will have that pattern fa'al. There's also the pattern fu'ul, like wujud, sujud, nuzul, khuruj. There's the pattern fi'al, like qiyam. There's the pattern fa'al, like dhahab. The difference being a fatha on dhahab versus a kasra under qiyam. There's the pattern fu'la, like ru'ya. There's a pattern fu'l, like kufr. The pattern fi'l, like dhikr, or the word fi'l itself. There's the pattern fa'ala, like rahma. They're not. None of these is a verb. They're all a masdar, which is the infinitive. So wujud, to find or to be found. Wajada would be the verb. There's the pattern fa'alan, like jarayan, hayawan, and many others like that.
So these are masdars, meaning they can form
Other words are formed from them. Verbs can be derived from them. Other forms of the word can be derived from them. This is considered in Arabic to be the source that everything is derived from.
Why didn't you put wajada?
Wajada is a verb. Now, normally in Arabic, when we are looking up a word in a dictionary and we're talking about a word, we use the verb form. So we don't speak of, say, the root ru'ya. We speak of the root ra'a, or wajada, or qatala, or khalaqa, or kataba. The reason is that the masdar is unpredictable and it sometimes has additional letters, whereas the verb is the original 3 letters. So it's much easier to compare kataba and qara'a than it is to compare qira'a and kitaba with, for example, sujud. Because qira'a is the masdar for qara'a. Sujud is the masdar for sajada. So if you have the masdars qira'a, sujud, you might not realize that they're from the same basic 3-letter structure. But if you're comparing qara'a and sajada, it's very clear. You can take qara'a, make it qari', maqru', sajid, masjud, if masjud were a word, sajjad, and you can form other forms that will be formed from the verb much easier. The masdar might contain additional letters, or it might be from a different pattern, and so it's not used as frequently. But when you hear somebody say that, for example, qara'a means to read, that's not exactly correct. Qara'a doesn't mean to read. Qira'a means to read. Qara'a means he read. Kataba means he wrote. Kitaba means to write. Kitaba is to write.
To write or the act of writing?
So to write, the act of writing, yeah, and it can also mean something that is written as well. One common use for the masdar is that it's often used in a prepositional phrase.
Masdars are always nouns.
Masdar is considered to be a noun in Arabic. It is a noun, and it can therefore be a fa'il, or a maf'ul, or a mubtada, or a khabar. It can function as a noun. So, some sample sentences. Mana'ahu min ad-dukhul. He prevented him from ad-dukhul, entry, or entering. Dukhul is a masdar.
spawned from.
الدخول is a masdar by itself. دعوناهم or دعاه إلى الخروج. دعاه دعوناهم إلى الخروج. To, he called him or we called them to exiting or to leave.
Leaving, it should be because masdar should be in or.
So to leave or leaving both have the same meaning. Whichever fits better in English you can use.
But we said it's supposed to be infinite.
Infinitive can be either leaving or to leave. In Arabic it's the same form that's used for both.
In that case, the masdar can you underline the masdar?
Al-Khuruj is the masdar in that sentence. And in the next sentence, As-Sama' is the masdar. Amaruna bis-Sama'. They commanded us to listen. Sama'.
What's the significance that you're mentioning masdar separately?
Well, masdar is a form of noun that will exist for every verb, and its usage is different from the verb because it's a noun. It can be used as a subject of a sentence. It can come after harful jar. So that's why it needs to be mentioned separately. The use of a masdar is different from the verb. And there's certain usage of the masdar which are exclusive to Arabic. That don't have a very good correspondence in English. Except maybe in sort of pseudo-biblical English. We'll come to that in just a few minutes. The masdar has the same meaning as the verb, but it does not have a time. So when I say khalaqa, he created in the past, if I say khalq, it doesn't tell you when. But khalq does contain the meaning of the action, creation. And because it contains the meaning of the action, even though it doesn't have a time, it can have a fa'il and a maf'ul. Right? So the masdar denotes an action. If it's a transitive verb, then the masdar denotes a transitive action, or an action that requires a doer and a doee. So khalq requires a khaliq and a makhluq, as opposed to dhahab, which just requires a dhahib, because there's no recipient to that action. Whoever goes, they're the doer, there's no recipient. The usage of the masdar is often where the masdar is mudaf to a noun. It's attached to a noun. And that can be either the fa'il or the maf'ul. So I can say, for example, sarrani. Sarra is a verb. The root letter is sin, ra, ra. The masdar is surur, means to make happy. Sarrani, it made me happy. What made me happy? Being the violent person that I am, darbu zaydin. For Zayd. So the thrashing of Zayd made me happy. Darbu zaydin. But this sentence, darb is a masdar. It's the fa'il, because it's what made me happy. That's why it's darbu zaydin. Darb is the fa'il. the beating of Zayd is what made me happy. Right? We'll have a better example to rectify the opinions, the stereotype of Muslims afterwards. But Darbu Zaydin, right? That's the subject. That's what made me happy. Ni is the fa'il, is the maf'ul. So now, Darbu Zaydin, hitting, or beating, or thrashing, of Zayd. Is darb a noun that has a fa'il and a maf'ul, or just a fa'il? It's only fun to beat somebody if you have somebody to beat, right? It has a fa'il and a maf'ul. Right? So, darbu Zaydin could mean the hitting of Zayd, meaning he was the hitter. His manner of hitting made me happy. And what he might have been hitting might very well be that he was beating a carpet to take out the dust. He was the one doing the hitting, in which case the reputation of Muslims is saved. It's not an example of violence, it's an example of household work. Or it could be Darbu Zaydin, the hitting of Zayd, as the recipient, in which case it would be maf'ul. Zayd would be the maf'ul. We don't know from this sentence. Darbu Zaydin, the hitting of Zayd. It could be the hitting of somebody hitting Zayd, or it could be the hitting of Zayd hitting somebody else. So, Darbu Zaydin could either mean Zayd's doing the hitting, or Zayd's being hit. Zayd could be the darib or the madroob in this sentence. Now sometimes the context will make it clear. So for example, if I say Sarrani qira'atu Zayd. Well, would Zayd be the one doing the reading, or would Zayd be the one who is read? The one who is doing the reading. Zayd would be the qari'. Probably not the one that is read. Unless Zayd is one of those people who lays down in the park as a letter, and then somebody from top of a skyscraper is reading. Right? Zayd would be the reader. So the context tells you that qira'atu Zayd is the fa'il in meaning. But if I say Sarrani qira'atul Qur'an, it's the same structure that's being used. Qira'atu Zayd, qira'atul Qur'an. But here Qur'an is the maf'ul. The book will not stand up and read itself. Qira'atul Qur'an, reading of the Qur'an. So the context can make clear whether it's the fa'il or the maf'ul. But sometimes the context will not make it clear. Right? So you could have a sentence like Sarrani aklul hirrati, the eating of the cat. Now, if the cat is eating a mouse, then aklul hirra means the way the cat was doing the eating pleased me. But if there's a predator that comes and eats the cat, then it is the being eaten of the cat that is pleasing me. And so you can get carried away with examples, but the point is that this form of idafa, masdar to a noun, it can either be the doer or the doee, the fa'il or the maf'ul.
But if you're putting Sarrani, then it's always fa'il, right?
Well, the masdar will be the fa'il of sarra, because that masdar is what's making you happy. The eating, the beating, the reading, the writing, that's making you happy. But that masdar itself has a doer, somebody who's doing that masdar, and it has, in some cases, something that masdar is being done to. When the masdar is made mudaf, you don't know whether it's made mudaf to the doer or to the one that is being done. Right? So if I say خلقك, خلقك could mean you're creating or you're being created. It could mean you as a makhluq of God or you as a khaliq of something that you have created. خلقك structurally could mean either one. But if I'm speaking of Allah, right? Allah ahsanul khaliqeen. And then I start speaking about how He created you, then obviously khalquka would mean you're being created. But if I'm speaking of you as a creative person, as an artist, and then I say sarrani khalquka, that means you're creating. So for examples, you can say khalqullah. Obviously God will only be a creator. That would be the creator. Dukhulur rijal, the entering of the men. Dukhul will have a fa'il, but not a maf'ul. So that means the entering of men. God's creation is also khalqullah. And then ba'thul malik, the sending of the king, because the king does not get sent. If you try to send a king somewhere, then it'll have unpleasant consequences. So ba'thul malik, even though ba'thul malik could technically mean the king being sent, but contextually you know that nobody is going to stand up on the throne and say, I want you to go get me a glass of water. Right? The king will do the sending. So the context tells you that ba'thul malik is the fa'il of ba'th, not the maf'ul. But then khalqul ard, the ard will not create, it will be created. So that's the created. Dukhulul bayt, a house will be entered, not enter. Ba'thu rasul, the sending of a messenger. The messenger is sent. So you can tell by the context whether it's the fa'il or the maf'ul.
Can you translate dukhul as
Dukhul can mean entrance. It can mean the act of entering. Context will tell you which translation is best to use. Now, what happens if you want to say both? God's creating of the earth. Can you do that? So you want to say creation, and you want to mention both the doer and the one to whom it is done. Khalq. You'll still say the masdar will be khalq. So you'll say khalq. What you'll do in this case is you'll first say the fa'il and you'll make it mudaf. So you'll say khalqullahi. And then usually you'll keep this form, khalqullahi, the creating of God, and then you'll put the maf'ul after, and the maf'ul will be mansub. Khalqullahi al-ard. Al-arda. It's mansub because it's maf'ul, creating by God of the earth. Right? So just as if there had been a verb, this will be mansub.
This is not a real sentence.
No, it's not a full sentence because it's not a verb. So you can say, for example, sarrani khalqullahi al-ard. Right? It pleased me that God created the earth, or God's creation of the earth pleased me. If you're observing it from some other galaxy. Dukhulur rijali, the entering of the men, al-bayta, into the house. Ba'thul maliki, rasula. entering into the descending, the king sending of a messenger. So, to see how that works, there's other forms that can also be used. This is one form, it's relatively common, but there are also other possibilities which we will see in the future as well. So recognize this, that's not the only way to express that sentence. In Arabic, there is one usage of the masdar which is not common in English, and it's sometimes a bit difficult to translate. It's known as al-maf'ul al-mutlaq. And that is when a masdar is used with a verb in order to explain either how many times or in what manner the verb took place, or just to emphasize the taking of the verb. So we can say katabtuhu kitabatan, I wrote it a writing. Darabtuhu darban, I hit him a hitting. Sajadtu sajdatan, I prostrated a prostration. And that can be used to explain number. So I can say sajadtu sajdatan, I prostrated one prostration. Sajadtu sajdatayn, I prostrated two prostrations.
Could it also take the meaning of like a prostrated, what a prostration?
No, if you want to express surprise, there's another form to use. It can be used for emphasis, to explain the type, or to explain the number of an action. We can look at the examples that are found in the Quran. There's many examples in the Quran. Uzkurullaha dhikran kathiran. So Uzkurullah means remember God. Dhikran, a remembrance. And then that dhikran is described by an adjective kathiran. What kind of a remembrance? A remembrance that is frequent. Right? So here, dhikran kathiran is telling us what kind of a remembrance to remember God. And you could have put another adjective instead of kathiran if you were writing the Quran. It could have been Uzkurullaha dhikran jamilan, a beautiful remembrance. Well, this usage, it's there to give a more complete picture, or to convey a more complete meaning. So Udhkurullah is just a general remember God. But this verse wants to say that remember God frequently. We can say Udhkurullah kathira. But dhikran kathiran is is emphasizing not just the frequency of, not just frequently, but a frequent mentioning. So it's telling us the manner in which the action is being performed. There are sometimes when a similar meaning can be conveyed with maf'ul mutlaq, and it can be conveyed in another expression as well. But there might be a slight difference in meaning.
In this condition, the askuru is the verb, and dhikran is the
Maf'ul mutlaq. And maf'ul mutlaq will always be mansub. It's one of the types of maf'ul. So, for another example, يُحَاسَبُ حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا. He will be held to account. حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا, an easy holding to account. What kind of hisab will it be? An easy one. كُلَّ شَيْءٍ فَصَّلْنَاهُ تَفْصِيلًا. We detailed it, a detailing. There's no adjective there. It's فَصَّلْنَاهُ تَفْصِيلًا. We detailed it, a detailing. It's just for emphasis. If you say فَصَّلْنَاهُ, that means that we detailed it. But تفصيلا is for emphasis. وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. They did not change a changing. Again, that's for emphasis. يُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. To purify, a thorough purification. The word thorough is not literally in the text, but the emphasis conveys that meaning. So literally it means to purify you a purification, but the emphasis indicates that it's an emphatic or an intense purification. صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. سلموا تسليما. This is a command form. We haven't covered it yet. Submit a submission. Sallama has two meanings in Arabic, and both meanings could conceivably be intended in this verse. One is submit. So, sallimu tasliman, submit a submission. The other meaning is to say salam. So, sallimu tasliman, say salam or give your greetings. A greeting. Subhanallah is also considered maf'ul mutlaq. But it's a maf'ul mutlaq in which the verb itself is dropped. And that sometimes happens. So in Arabic you will often see shukran. Afwan. Afwan, forgiveness. Okay, sorry. Shukran. Thank you.
Would it also be used for your
Afwan can be used for you're welcome. The same meaning is there. So shukran, afwan.
What's the verb that's dropped
In subhanallah or subhanaka, the word is usabbihu. I glorify. Subhanaka, your glorification. In shukran, it's ashkuru, I thank. In afwan, it's urfu, forgive. Ma'adhiratan is again forgiveness. I'udhir, forgive. So there's many forms like that.
Shukran. So just the act of thanking.
Literally, yeah, it's shukran, thanking. But the verb is understood, that I am thanking you a thanking. I'm thanking you a goodly thanking.
And so the you is also not there. I mean, you could say, I'm thanking you. But the you is also dropped.
It's dropped. The object of the thanks is dropped. And that's why you can sometimes see an expression like shukran laka. A laka is added to indicate who is the recipient of that. Shukran lakum. Thank you.
Is this common in modern Arabic also? Or is it like
There's certain set phrases that are used in modern Arabic. It was much more common in classical Arabic. And then a few examples for the number sajadtu sajdataini. I prostrated 2 prostrations. Tukabbirullaha thalatha takbiratin. You will do takbir or recite takbir 3 times. I want to begin lesson 12. And I also want to do some practice with the Quran. So the way we're going to fit both of those in is we'll go very quickly through lesson 12, the first page, and introduce the material. Take a look at it afterwards, and if there's any questions, then please bring them next week. But the practice will also be very useful for us, inshallah. In Arabic, we discussed the fi'l madi, or al-fi'l al-madi, the past tense verbs, also called the perfect. Now we're going to come to the imperfect, the present and future tense. It's the same form in Arabic. So the same form can be used for the present and for the future, and for the habitual, and for the continuous, and for many other meanings as well. So, the progressive. So, the way to think of the present tense or the imperfect is that it's derived from the madi form with certain modifications. There will be a prefix at the beginning of the verb, and there will be suffixes at the end in some cases. So let's take the verb fa'ala. That's our standard verb, right? Fa'ala, past tense. For the imperfect, for the mudari' form, we will add a ya in the beginning. The first letter will have a sukoon. The second original letter will have a haraka, in this case fatha. The third letter will have a dhamma. Yafa'alu. Just look at the Arabic line. Yafa'alu, he does. Yafa'alane, 2 men do. Yafa'aluna, all of them do.
it's doing.
So it can be they do, or they are doing, or they will do. Do, are doing, or will do.
That's different from fa'ala.
Fa'ala means they did. Yaf'alu, they are doing.
So this is past.
This is the
future.
present and future, or imperfect. The feminine is a little bit more complex. Because men tend to be simple, apparently, at least in terms of the verb forms that they have in Arabic. I don't know if it's true or not in real life. The first two forms will have the prefix ta. Ya, taf'alu, taf'alani. She and they. But then the feminine plural has the prefix ya, yaf'alna. So it's either going to be the prefix ta or ya. Then for the second person masculine, now this is the third row. Again we have tafa'alu. Do you see where that is? It's the second person masculine. Tafa'alu, dual tafa'alane, plural tafa'aluna. For the feminine, the singular is now tafa'alina, tafa'alane. And then remember before it converted to a ya in the plural? Here it stays as a ta. Taf'alna. And then the first person will be af'alu and naf'alu. There is no af'aluna, naf'aluna. There is no difference between masculine and feminine. Af'alu is singular, naf'alu is plural. There is no other form. Note that there are certain forms that are ambiguous. The form taf'alu. It can be third person feminine, she does, or it can be second person masculine, you are doing, or you do. Notice that the form taf'alane can mean, it can't mean you two men, because that would be yaf'alane. But it can mean you two women are doing. It can mean, it can't mean those two men. That would be yaf'alane. It can mean you two men or you two women, and it can mean those two women. So there are these forms that are ambiguous. But the main difference between the mudari' and the madi. Number one, mudari' will have a prefix. Yaf'alu or taf'alu or af'alu or naf'alu, there will be a prefix. Mudari' is the imperfect, this present and future. The second major difference that you'll notice is that the suffixes in the mudari' they sometimes have a noon. Yaf'aluna, yaf'alane. In the madi we didn't have that. Right? So we have kataba, kataba, katabu. But in the mudari' we have yaktubu, yaktubani, yaktubuna. There's that noon. And because I want to have mercy on you, we're not going to discuss the details of that noon. There's a little bit of detail involved. So the parts of this chart that talk about the pronoun and talk about the i'rab, we're going to cover inshallah next week. But I want to look at a sample from the Quran. So I will write the verse and just take a few minutes to think about it, and then we'll go over it together inshallah. This is Surah Baqarah, verse number 30. When you're presented with a text of Arabic like this, it's very easy to say, let me find the first translation and see what it means. But now you know enough Arabic, especially with what we just covered today, to take a sentence like this and understand it. A few words may be unfamiliar, but the structure should be relatively familiar. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. The first thing that you need to know is where do the little parts of the sentence or the paragraph start and end. So we have quotes that are here. إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. And then there's quotes here. أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. Now those are quotation marks, they're not tanweens. Take a minute or two to look at that sentence, see if you can figure out any part of the structure, and then we'll talk about it. So what are the fa'il, maf'ul? How do the parts of the sentence relate to one another? Let me read it one more time. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ. So it's a conversation. And who are the parts of the conversation? رَبُّكَ and لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ. Those are the two parts. There's a dialogue between Rabbuka, your Lord, and al-malaika, the angels. Lil-malaika, to the angels. So, إِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ. What is the fa'il of قَالَ? Rabbuka. Your Lord said, Lil-malaika, to the angels. What is إِذْ? When. Right, that just tells us that Allah is speaking, reminding us of an incident. So, إِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ is a verb, fa'il, and لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ is jar wa majroor. And then إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً is a quotation of what God said. And we know the structure, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. What is إِنِّي? Indeed, inna, it requires an ism and a khabar. The ism of inna is this ya, meaning ana, indeed I. And the khabar is ja'ilun, and the khabar should be marfu'. Is ja'ilun marfu'? Yes. So, inni ja'ilun, I am creating. Ja'il is what type of a noun? Ismul fa'il, not fa'il. Ismul fa'il. It's not fa'il because there's no verb here. Right? Fa'il comes when there's a verb. This is ismul fa'il. It's the khabar of inna, and that khabar is ismul fa'il. And if you remember, these words that are derived from a verb, or that have the meaning of a verb, like ismul fa'il, ismul maf'ul, like the masdar, they can take a maf'ul because they have the meaning of a verb. So جاعل خليفة. خليفة is mansub because it is the maf'ul. I am creating, or I am the creator, or I am going to create. Do you remember one of the meanings of ism al-fa'il was that it can refer to the future tense. Inni fa'ilun, I will do. So inni ja'ilun, I will create. So Allah gave a heads up to the angels that I'm about to do this. Inni ja'ilun, I will create. Ja'ilun khalifatan, I will create a khalifa. Fil ard, in the earth. قالوا, they said. The waw is the subject, the fa'il. It refers back to malaika. Remember we said that we can use little numbers if you want to explain that. You can do something like that, so you know that قالوا is referring to malaika. أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء. Is just a word for a question. Is it the case? تجعل, we just did مضارع. تجعل, you will make. Second person singular, masculine. You will make. This man is the maf'ul. You will make someone. Right? He said, جاعل خليفة. I am making a khalifa. They said, أتجعل man? Are you going to make this man who will do fasad and who will spill blood? So the man is the maf'ul of taj'alu. You're going to make this person?
Is it man or is it that whole like man?
Well, that whole phrase, man yufsidu fiha wa yasfiku dima. Fiha again is just like fil ard, fiha, in it. So you can put another number here, 4. This fiha, the ha refers to ard. Ard is feminine in Arabic. So that goes back to that. Man yufsidu, one who will do fasad, meaning cause corruption. Fiha, in it. That's also referring to the earth. وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء. يَسْفِكُ is فعل مضارع. He will spill or shed blood. الدماء. Malaika is a plural. It's not feminine. It's plural of malak.
Singular.
No, the singular is not feminine. So malaika is a plural. It's like saying ulama, or in modern Arabic, dakatira is the plural of doctor. So malaika is like that. In fact, the Quran says that the malaika are not to be treated as women. It's the unbelievers who call them women. For a traditional Arabic word, malahida, plural of mulhid, the atheists. So malaika, angels. So that verse reviewed a few things that we have covered before or that we're just working on right now. Inshallah, for next week, take a look at lesson 12 and bring any questions that you have.